And I'd like to introduce you, Bill Emsinger, though. Where are you at? Where are you from, Bill?
I am from Dayton, Tennessee.
Dayton, Tennessee. Okay, very good. So, you told me something you wanted to talk about what's going on with Amtrak and stuff. So, if you want to talk about yourself a little bit, then we go into it. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, sure. Well, I'll give you a little background about myself. I am an avid rail fan.
Sure.
My earliest memories was in a stroller at the Summit, New Jersey train station on the Erie-Lackawanna line, and I've been a rail fan ever since. I've never worked for the railroad. I have friends that do, but I love trains, and I've traveled on trains all over the country. I've traveled on Amtrak over 100,000 miles on Amtrak, and I've traveled every long-distance route. Yeah, I've traveled every long-distance routes in the country, some of them many times, and most of them they're full length, sometimes all in one trip.
Wow.
And on the auto train a few times, and living in New Jersey, growing up there, I've ridden on about 95% of the New York subway, and I've been all over the place. But what I want to share is that I'm conservative-minded, both physically and politically, and that produces a little bit of a conflict with my interest in trains and how Amtrak is handled, being funded, getting a considerable amount of funding from the government.
Yeah, I've heard things about Amtrak was running out of trains too. I've been seeing a lot of that going on too. So I guess they're having train shortages. Maybe you could give a little insight on that.
Yeah, little train shortages. Yeah. I actually, I don't always keep up on the latest, but I did actually read this. Apparently, the Horizon train cars that what I understand is they were getting kind of rusty, and they pulled them out of service. So that canceled a lot of trains and a lot of short distance routes, and they're slowly trying to scramble to get together the Amfleet coaches that they have available from various places and try to get those trains running again. I don't know the latest status on that, but that's got to be a mess. I can't imagine. But Amtrak gets a lot of funding from the government, and so how do I reconcile my interest in trains with my conservative mindset? And I've struggled with that for many years because I don't like taxpayer money, my money, which I pay taxes, and I don't want my money spent on things that I want to be able to choose how I spend my money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, everybody else in this country would too. So absolutely.
Yeah. And secondly, with the money that Amtrak gets from the government, it makes Amtrak's biggest customer is the government. It's not any single passenger. And so Amtrak has to do kind of what the government tells it to do, or it's not going to get the money it needs to keep going.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. So how do I reconcile this? Well, I've thought about it for years, and I don't have a complete answer, but I do have some thoughts. And why I'm sharing this with your radio listening friends is I'm hoping that somebody out there is going to have bigger ideas than I do, and I've got a few thoughts to trigger your mind, and that they're going to be able to actually implement some of these thoughts and get Amtrak to a point where it's less and less dependent on federal spending. I'll point out, first of all, that I think Brightline's doing a pretty good job of that.
Oh, yeah, me, Dave, we've been talking about that in the past, so not the last time around, though, but a couple times before that. So it's a great thing that's going on down there, and hopefully that's going to get extended elsewhere around through the country. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really impressed with what they've done so far, and they're aiming to extend that out to Tampa and beyond Orlando, and I think they could expand to Jacksonville and even Atlanta. I think that would be a fantastic expansion, and of course they're working on Brightline West. But first of all, let's look at the problem a little bit.
Sure.
What I'm going to say may sound a little bit scary to you rail fans out there, because I'm going to sound like the interstate lobby.
Okay.
And I thought through a lot of the arguments that Amtrak is made in favor of Amtrak, I could go through a bunch of them. I don't want to take up too much time, but let's focus on one of the big ones. um, and that is, how much fuel does Amtrak use per passenger per mile? Now, this is
That's a good question. That's a good question right there.
It is, and they point out, and rightly so, that it's a lot more efficient in fuel per mile than airlines. It's more efficient than cars. It's pretty close to buses from what I've seen. But there's another problem. Amtrak, most of the long-distance trains, as you know, they run on freight railroads all over the country.
Yeah, that's a big problem sometimes.
And yes, it is, and it causes delays, and sometimes they're lengthy delays. 6, 8. By the way, I've been on Amtrak with all my travels, and a lot of times, they're within an hour of being on time, and occasionally they're on time, actually. But they have had trips that are 6, 8, and even 10 hours late. I could tell you stories about that.
Well, that's been happening around here a lot, here on the Philadelphia-Chicago line up here from Philadelphia to Chicago. We have 3 that runs through the middle of the night, though, and there's been quite a few times, so they were so late they actually went through here in the daytime, which is a rarity.
Yes,
absolutely.
And you're in Ohio, is that right?
Yeah. Collins, Ohio. I'm probably about 12 miles from the lakeshore of Lake Erie, and that Chicago line runs right up on the lakeshore.
So, Lakeshore Limited. I've been on that train. That's probably the one I've been on the most.
Exactly.
That was the one that was two trips in a row. One was 8 hours late. The next was 10 hours late. And one they hit a car, and the other one they had a detour around a freight derailment. So that was quite a trip. I loved it.
Okay, you might be referring to the derailment in Sandusky, Ohio, where all that paraffin wax dumped.
Well, this was in 1990.
Oh, okay.
4 or 1995.
Okay, then it was way before that. Now, this was more recent, though. Happened about maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was pretty horrible. But let's look at something here. Do you know about how many passengers a typical long-distance Amtrak train holds?
Not offhand, though. Never had an opportunity to ride Amtrak.
Yeah. Okay, well, get on the train, ride, get trip somewhere. It's fun. But my guess, based on what I've seen, and I actually just ran some numbers tonight on the California Zephyr, and it looks like end to end over the course of Chicago to Los Angeles to Oakland. They might have about 500 and change passengers that get on and off, at various places along the trip, and they may have as many as 300 at any given time. Okay.
Wow.
And that's pretty good. But a lot of times in the off seasons, there's times when I've been on the Texas Eagle and in January, and it's like, where is everybody? Because I'm sitting in a coach that's about half full, and it's like, where is everybody? But then it fills up as they go along, and it was out of San Antonio going to Chicago, and there it fills up. And, well, here we go. 300 people could easily fit on about, say, 20 buses. Who wants to ride a bus, right? I don't. But I've ridden buses in Mexico, and they're actually nice. And anybody out there done that? I don't know, but they're actually nice buses. I've done that a few times, and they could do that here. Now, I'm not suggesting we do this. Now, bear with me.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, but let's go back to the freight railroads.
Sure.
If you take Amtrak off the track, which I don't want to do, but if you do, the freight railroads could run another freight train in its place, right?
Yeah, true.
How many trucks of freight can a freight train take?
More than I can shake a stick at, I'll tell you that.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I Googled this, too, just before the show, because I was guessing easily 200. Okay?
Wow.
200.
That's quite a bit.
And I Googled it, and they said, one of those double-stacked trains, they could do 300, 400 boxes.
Easily.
Easily,
Easily, yeah.
Yeah, easily, yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about putting 20 buses on the road in exchange for taking 400 trucks off the road, which I think is a pretty good environmental benefit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Versus well, even though them locomotives, they do burn up a lot of diesel at time, but once they are up and running, though, without putting power and hammer it, though, they're actually pretty clean. Compared to what I see on these truckers going down the road, I see suet coming out like a Berkshire 284 locomotive or something, you know.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking, as a rail fan, man, I don't want to give up Amtrak, because Amtrak, it's a fabulous way to travel. Like I said, I've traveled every route in the country. I've been over Donner Pass, which is absolutely spectacular.
Not to mention the scenery you get to see as you go along.
I mean,
absolutely.
You stop at various places. You can get off the train in Chicago and St. Louis and Havre, North Montana, and they stop there for like an hour or so, and you can walk over to the local grocery store and buy a sandwich. I mean, you can do things like that, and you can go places. 400, 500 destinations. You can go all over the country, just almost anywhere. So I'm not saying we give up Amtrak, but how do we reconcile this issue? And I came to the realization, and this is where I want your listeners to put on your thinking caps and say, how can we really change things? What I'm seeing is as a conservative-minded and financially conservative, and I've got a small business. I make milk soap. I have goats outside that I milk every day. And I run it as a business, and we're underutilizing Amtrak huge. I think that's part of the answer. At the amount of effort going into running the trains and all the stations they stop at and keeping them clean and manned and all that kind of stuff for one train a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
One train a day. That doesn't have a lot. I mean, yeah, they do have a lot of, but not compared to the airports, where how many people go through an airport every day? I mean, I'm 3 hours from Atlanta. That airport handles millions of people every year. One airport handles, far more people than Amtrak does on their entire network. So we're underutilizing Amtrak. Now, this is an issue that I've read about in Trains magazine and other places, that rail fan groups online and stuff. They're like, Amtrak is really hurting for equipment on these long distance trains. And, there are a couple of recent derailments, the one in Empire Builder and the Southwest Chief, they lost, they every time that happens, some of these cars are out of service for a while, to say nothing of people that have died as a result, which is terrible. And by the way, the safety record of trains is very good. But I don't want to belittle that point.
Right.
The Amtrak is hurting for equipment, and you could make those trains a lot longer. You can carry a lot more people.
Sure.
And if just doing that alone will solve some of the problem. Now let's look back at those 20 buses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's look at that for a minute, because I think that might be part of the solution. And I'm not saying replace the train with buses, but Amtrak doesn't go everywhere. Right now, I'm in Dayton, Tennessee. It's 3 hours to Atlanta. That's the closest Amtrak that we have. And it's 6 hours to Memphis for the City of New Orleans train. It's just under 6 hours to Charleston, West Virginia, for the 3-day-a-week Crescent. That's the Cardinal. 3-day-a-week Cardinal train. I'm basically in an Amtrak island.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to Amtrak could, if they wanted to, and there's reasons why they don't. Apparently the route isn't fast enough, but they could run a train, and the train track that goes through Dayton, it's known as the Rat Hole Division. used to be, I think it was Cincinnati Southern.
Yep.
And,
there's a gentleman named Jawtooth. Actually, he's a ham radio operator too, though, and he calls that area the Rat Hole Division down there.
Rat Hole.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. Well, before I got married, I lived with a friend that had a house next to the tracks, and they had, I said eventually, I said, I want that bedroom that's next to the tracks. And when the train would come through, I'd look out the window and see what it was. Well, one night it was the circus train, but every night it was the Triple Crown service, the Norfolk Southern. String of all those trucks just directly on their bogies would come through, and they stopped running them. Like I think last summer, was it? Do you know about that?
No, I don't think so. But go ahead.
You know what I'm talking about with the Triple Crown trains?
I've heard of it though, but I'm not exactly 100% familiar with it though.
Yeah. Okay. Well. It was. Excuse me. It was a very very innovative design. It was just basically a truck trailer with train wheels and bogies underneath it, and connected to the next truck. And it was not on flat cars. It was just a string of these truck trailers. It just looked like a really long truck. But they
really.
It was, you can read about it online, and Trains magazine has articles about why it worked for a while, and then the standard container cars have basically taken over.
It looks like that's going to be decreasing too with all this tariffs and stuff. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well,
look at China though; they can't ship their stuff out because we're not taking it. They don't want to send it here to pay that tariffs.
Yeah, right.
So it looks like there's going to be a decline here. In fact, I already noticed it.
Yeah.
I'm already noticing it. We're about 23:20 there. We've been on here probably a little over 20 minutes. So.
Okay.
You could end or go on a little bit more as you wish.
Well, if I don't mind, I could go on a little bit more because I still got thoughts on this. I mean, the Triple Crown service, they would come through regularly every night, and it was very, very timely. But let's look at those 20 buses again. If you were to operate 20 buses on, say, Chicago, Los Angeles, for example, you could have a bus departing almost every hour of the day.
Sure.
And they don't have to take the same route. They could take different routes. Each bus could take a bit of a different route. And they could connect with the Amtrak, at various places along the way. They could provide service when the Amtrak train is really, really late. They could provide, a lot of connections to those trains and provide service to more rural areas that are never going to have any hope of having an Amtrak train come through their town. So that's one thought. Now, I'm not saying that would work, but I'm just putting it out there as a possibility. The other thing I think that's really interesting, and this is something Amtrak has been doing, and I really applaud them for doing this. The train that runs from to Lynchburg, Virginia, that they extended to Roanoke recently, it parallels. It's on the same route as the Crescent to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first put that in, I was like, that's just going to take passengers away from the Crescent. Well, the reality is the Crescent's ridership has increased. And I think there's some reasons for that. It takes some local passengers off that train, and often off the Crescent, and allows for more long distance passengers. That's part of it. I think the car, more visibility, more awareness, and more reliability, and more flexibility. I think all those things play into that. And then, of course, they did the same thing with, what is the name of that train that's going to St. Paul, Minneapolis, and paralleling the Builder route? They did the same thing there. And I think there's opportunities for things like that elsewhere, too. And that kind of parallels with the idea of running these buses that I'm talking about, but with a train, which is better.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think that's the kind of thinking, that's kind of out of the box thinking that I think is what we need to be thinking about. But unfortunately, the government, picking and choosing what Amtrak gets to do, that kind of thinking gets squashed.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's now out there, and I just hope somebody out there will pick up on this and Now, I've got a website. I can share that with you at some point.
Go ahead, and you can say it right over there too if you like.
Well, it's kind of a confusing address, and I don't have it right in front of me. So
okay, no problem. You can shoot me a text with a link or something, if you like.
I'll send you an email with that in it, something like that. But then the other thing, I'll close on this, is about freight railroads. And I had this idea. I just said, what can we do to improve freight rail reliability? Because that's one of the big hindrances to people using shipping by rail for freight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a lot of stuff goes by truck that could go by train. And I had the idea, and I don't know if this would work, but what if for priority shipments on rail, you have a dedicated freight engine pick up cars at the origin point, stay with those cars for the entire trip. That doesn't mean that there has to be a separate train for the entire trip. And all it means is that those cars are delivered directly to a freight yard. Maybe that engine is attached to a train that's about to depart going in the right direction. It stays with that train, and it can act as a DPU unit, distributed power unit, en route to the next destination. When that train is taken apart, those cars already have an engine attached. They detach from the regular train, and they go on to wherever they need to go next. They don't have to sit in the yard for hours to be sorted and over a hump. They don't have to be switched or back and forth to get on the next train. They can just be moved to where they need to go. They can attach to another train that's ready to depart, or if the delivery is local, nearby, they can just go right to where the delivery point is. Again, I don't work in the railroad industry. I don't know how well that would work, but those that do, think about it, because
absolutely,
if something like that could work, and that could attract, and you charge reasonably for that. I mean, you charge extra because that's a priority service. But if it's reliable, people will pay for that. They will pay extra for reliability, and that's why they use
absolutely.
Bucks. So I just hope that people out there, anybody that's listening, picks up on these ideas. And I've got a lot more ideas about this, and I've typed up on the website. I'll get that to you.
Okay, very good. And you're welcome to come back on sometime again in the future too. So
okay,
when but we'll have David Coleman on the first of next or the third of next month though again. So okay, we've been on here about 26 minutes. Give a little what. Appreciate you coming on, Bill. Really do.
Okay, well, thank you. It was fun.
Okay, hope you have a great night and evening there. So, all righty.
Happy Easter to you.
Oh, you too. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, all right. You take care, Bill.
All right, good night.
Have a good night.
Yep.
Okay, that was Bill Emsinger, though, from Dayton, Tennessee, though, sharing his thoughts on the views of what's happening with Amtrak, though. And I know there's people out there, and I see one listener out there don't care about the train so much. Well, think of this. Where are you going to get your damn gasoline? Where are you going to get your groceries and stuff? If they stop, you ain't going to be driving nowhere. Or even buy a new car, where they all come from Detroit, or in my case over here in Marysville, where they make Hondas and Toyotas down there. So think about that. It's very important that we have railroading. And it is current news. So if you don't like trains, well, that's on you.